It's the first day. I will give you the
Oh,
brief before we are starting. Okay.
that's okay.
So first of all, when it comes to the let me recall that we discussed yesterday. Those were basic discussions. Okay. So when we talk about the cloud system or cloud structure, that means the you can say you are accessing the services through the internet, right? When we talk about the public cloud, for example, this is a data center of AWS. I will just say AWS DC, and you are using AWS services through the AWS portal, right? There's a portal, or you can say AWS console, by which you can access the AWS services. Okay. So what's actually happening whenever you are launching a resource through the portal, the resource is actually being launched on the AWS data center. Not the whole resource is being occupied for you or kept separate for you. Sorry, they are sorry, they're just giving you a small virtual amount of resource so that you can perform your task into that. For example, if I'm going to launch an EC2 instance of 1 gigabytes of RAM, or if I'm going to launch one machine of 1 gigabytes of RAM and one CPU, then Amazon is going to allocate me a very small amount of resource in the data center, and I will be using that resource through the portal or through the SH, whatever concept I am going to use there. Okay. So this is just a simple public cloud, how public cloud works. When we talk about the private clouds are dedicated to the organizations. Organization build the private cloud for their own use. Private clouds are not shared to the public because of the security reasons, because of the privacy of the data and their researches, right? And when we talk about the on-premises services, on-premises means like the cloud data centers directly sharing the resource, and you are taking the servers dedicatedly from the data centers. So what happens in the real world? Like most of the companies are using hybrid cloud system, okay, where they are using on-premises as well as public cloud as both. Some of the companies are completely dependent on public cloud, so they are just going with the AWS or Azure or GCP. Currently, Azure is leading the market. The reason behind that is because Azure has spent lots of amount on the advertisement. So, and providing these schemes and the offers to the organizations. That's why Azure is currently leading in the market. Before Azure, AWS was a huge leader in the market, and it was very difficult to beat the AWS because AWS's services are far better than any other cloud provider. We also have the GCP, the Google Cloud Platform, but GCP is not that easy to use. There are more complexities in using GCP. That's why people prefer AWS more than GCP. As well as when it comes to the Azure, there are some few benefits in Azure. That's why some people go with Azure. But AWS is very easy to use, and AWS provides you almost every service which is present in GCP or Azure. Okay. Now let's start with the AWS console. I hope you all got my point or what I was trying to explain you, right?
Yes, Manish.
Okay. So this is the AWS console where you will see like sign in options. And as you can see, we have two options here, root user and IAM user. So what root user actually means? Whenever you are going to create an account on AWS, the first user, like the email ID and the password that you're going to provide on the initial phase, that will be your root user. Okay, so root user can be considered as the admin user. If you guys are already aware about the Linux systems or Linux environment, you must know about the root user, right? That's the super user who has the all the privileges to access the stuff, right? And when we talk
Yeah.
about the IAM user, you can say are the users created by the root user. Like for example, I'm running an organization. I am the root user. I have access of the root user, right? And if you work for me or if you work in my organization and you say, "Hey, Manish, I need one AWS account or I need the account. I want to do some work in that." So what I'm gonna do? I will not share my root user account. I will just create your user that will be considered as IAM user, and I will provide you the access keys or username password to you, and you will be just logging into that, and you will be starting your work into this. Okay. So the major benefit of using the IAM user is that you can restrict the access. Like for example, I don't want you to launch the EC2 instances, so I can restrict you from that EC2 or EC2 service, right? Or I don't want to give you the access of billings, right? I don't want you to check out the billings, so I can restrict you from that as well. Or I want to restrict you from creating any other user, so I can also do that. So using the IAM service of AWS, we can restrict the people. It's basically identity access management, something like this, to restrict the people or to create the users to provide the access on the resources of AWS or particularly AWS account. Now, there is a very, I can say, myth that AWS, whenever we talk about the AWS account, like for example, we have two AWS accounts, right? The account one, A1, and account two, A2. So if I just ask you one question, for example, I have launched one resource in AWS account one, and I have launched one more resource in AWS account two, right? So is possible that both resources are launched in one data center if the region is same? Okay, let me give you region is same. If the both resources are in AP South one, okay. So can you tell me like, is there any chance that the both resources are launched in same data center?
What do you mean by data center? Are you talking about the availability zone
Yeah,
or
definitely
the individual
availability.
building in that availability zone or the individual rack in that building in that availability zone?
You can like say that individual building, that availability zone. Generally, data centers or availability zones are physical data centers, right? Region where we
Yeah,
have
but
multiple
in
availability
one
zones.
availability zone, we have multiple buildings as well, right?
Yeah, building. You can see that if there is a data center is of five buildings, right? A data center occupying five buildings, so you can see that this is a huge data center, right? So I'm just talking about the building. You can say, or you can say data center, one availability zone or data center. There are chances, but very less chances, but still there are chances, right? That if I select one region or one availability zone, there are chances that both the instances or both the servers are launched in one building or one data center. And how the separation will be created between these two accounts. If I, one more organization, which is my rival organization, both have launched, you both are using the AWS services, right, for their cloud work. And they have launched the instances, and both the servers are launched in one data center, suppose on one rack. So, are we like, is there any chance of security breach or something like that because they are sharing the same resource here?
Can we use VPC for this?
Yeah, VPC is a service. Definitely, we are going to use the VPC. Without VPC, we can't do anything in AWS. You can't launch the resource without VPC. VPC is must there. But I'm just asking, like the VPC, if we just forget about the VPC for one time.
Sure.
So what will happen here when it comes to the on-premises, right? In that case, you can think like it's a like risk here, right? If I launch a
Yeah.
resource in a server and somebody else is using the same resource or same server, then there are very high chances that if his server got breached, my server can also, or my data can also be breached. For example, let me give you a very small example. This is on server, right? What they actually do, they just on the OS or the infra, they just use the hypervisor and cut the machines, right? Most of the time they use the OS. Over the OS they use the virtualization technology, and they cut the machines. For the virtualization, they generally use, they use the KVM if they are using the Linux systems, right? So KVM is very popular to use to create the virtual machines on Linux systems. So what will be happening here? Like all these resources may be sharing the same server, right? All these, like for example, if some XYZ asked for a machine, I gave them this machine. And if there is any other organization, ABC, who asked for the machine, I gave them this machine, right? Now, for example, if the application deployed on this machine by ABC is vulnerable, you guys know about vulnerabilities, right? The bugs and the security issues, you can say older versions, anything by which the hacker can breach or exploit the vulnerability and get into the server or gain access or breach the data. For example, in this scenario, if the XYZ has deployed an application which is vulnerable application, so what is going to happen? If any hacker breaches the application of XYZ and gain access to the server somehow, it can also gain access to another server, right? The ABC server. So on Prime, like if we talk about the hosting services or something like that, when we talk about the cheap hosting services, like there are few hosting providers nearby in my city. They are providing these servers at very cheap prices, like 700 rupees per month, something like that. So yeah, people use those hosting providers, but they are very cheap and they don't care about security. They are going to buy one network connection. They are going to share the same thing to multiple peoples to earn money, right? They don't care about security. In that case, definitely this can be the huge issue. But when it comes to the on-premises for a huge organization, like for the organization like Swiggy, Zomato, Paytm, something like that, what they do, they buy the servers or they take the servers from the popular, you can say, data centers or the organizations. They take on-prem services from them, right? So they also sign the contract of the security and lots of stuff is there. So they have the security system there and also people are working there 24/7. That's why they take servers from them. They don't use the cheap services. And when it comes to the public cloud, now the question is that we just discussed the public on-premises cheap services, and public cloud is also cheap, right? It's not that I can say costly as compared to the high-end on-prem services. Then if there's a cheap service, then there's a mentality of Indian people, right? If something is cheap, then there are chances that the product will not be good, that good, right? But if we think about this here, they are providing us a resource, like pool based resource or pooling. They are using the pooling concept here. They are giving us resource from one rack, and they are dividing it to multiple people. Still, they are using these software based securities, like they have higher security, and they are using software based concepts, which are providing us the isolation, right? So VPC comes here. VPC means virtual private cloud. So what happens here, you can say that you have launched the instance here. Maybe that both instances are in same, you can say data center or same server, right? Or same hardware server. Still, they have a virtual separation or virtual isolation that the one server cannot or never can communicate with another server. If you don't want that, like we can do so without with VPC pairing, and also we have the concepts of cross account pairing. But if we haven't done that thing, there is no chance that both servers can communicate with each other, because even if they are in the same system, I'm not talking about the different rack, even if they are on the same rack, they cannot communicate with each other. This is called the program. Now this is the software based virtualization. Remember this is a VPC, virtual private network, right? It's not a virtual private cloud, it's not a private cloud, it's a virtual private cloud. Physically it can be the cloud only, right? Or physical server, which is a same server. So that's what I was trying to explain, that a VPC is a very powerful thing which is developed by Amazon, and lots of developers are continuously working on Amazon to improve the quality of Amazon UI and the Amazon services. They are working 24/7 into that. So they are building very excellent cloud service or cloud application. I I think you guys got it, right? If you have any questions, you can ask.
I'm good, Manish.
Okay. Anyone else?
Understood, Manish.
Okay. So now when we have the concept of VPC, that means we have the security, right? No one can interrupt us, no one can breach into the VPC and see our resources. So how we can assume the VPC? So VPC is nothing but it's a cloud area. You can say virtual private cloud. That's your own cloud. Okay. No one can get access into it. Now you can access this VPC if this VPC is launched in your account. So account is nothing. It's just a way to access your resources. It's just a UI, or you can say UI that we use on Facebook or any other social media, similar to that. A UI, just a UI, a web application. In the back end, they are communicating through the APIs. I guess you guys, all guys are aware about the APIs, the application programming interface. Whenever you're performing the clicks, they are sending requests, they are giving you the response, you are accessing the service through the API. Now, there is one more thing. Whenever we are launching an instance, like for example, if I ask you, launch me a PC for me or set up a PC for me, a Windows PC for me, what you guys gonna do? You guys gonna take a PC, you guys gonna install the Windows or just format the hard drive, then install the Windows. It's gonna take like around 1 hour, 2 hour to set up that, right? And if I have the requirement of the software, some softwares that I want to be pre-installed in that system, you guys will take more time. But when it comes to the AWS, how this thing is be happening automatically, like whenever we just perform a click, within few seconds or within 1 minute, we have a one system launched in front of us where we have the OS installed, we have the internet connectivity, everything is present already there. So it's not happening by people, like it's not the human effort which is happening in the back end, it's completely automation. The complete automation which is happening here, whenever you perform a click, a virtualization technology works and cuts a machine for you, gives you the access, install the all the packages for you, and everything is performed very quickly, right? So this is how the concept of AWS works. Now, when it comes to the VPC, if you have launched the resources in one VPC, for example, EC2 or database service or whatever you are going to use this inside this VPC, that will remain inside this VPC only. There is no outer connectivity till you open that, right? It's up to you what you want to open or what you don't want to do, right? It's up to you. And also, when it comes to the region, one region can have by default only 5 VPCs. Like for example, if in AWS we have lots of regions. Hello, hello.
Yes, Manish.
Yeah, are you saying
Yes, we can
something?
hear you.
No, 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 no.
Okay, okay. So I was saying like in AWS we have multiple regions. Multiple regions means multiple localities. In those localities we have availability zones. Okay, and one region can have multiple availability zones as well for the disaster management and that kind of stuff. Okay, now when it comes to the regions, okay, every region you can launch different VPCs, and by default you can launch only 5 VPCs in one region. Now you guys must be wondering, like, if I want 6 VPCs, then what I will do? You can, if you have the higher requirement, then you can request the AWS. Okay, they will listen to your request and they will provide you the one more VPC or more VPCs in your account. But generally, 5 VPCs are enough to perform your task. Even inside a VPC, you can create the public and private subnets, right? It's not like that you cannot do the separation in one VPC. One VPC means every resource will be talking to each other. No, it's again up to you what kind of networking you are building inside your VPC. You can create the public subnet, you can create the private subnet, you can keep the separation of multiple subnets. It's just up to you what kind of networking you are doing in your VPC. I guess you guys got the concept. Let's move to the AWS UI now. Okay, so this is the sign in area, and we have the create new account button here. If you just click here in the create a new account, AWS account, you will, I guess someone, yes, Anurag.
So when you use AWS in your full-time job,
Okay.
I'm sure you will not be using the UI. So when you are teaching us all of these concepts, can you also teach us how to provision them using the CLI or CloudFormation or Terraform, whatever tool you use?
We will be using the
Because
Terraform, but sometimes I also use the UI. It's not like that. Not use UI is not usable, right? Sometimes
okay,
we actually need the UI because I don't manage one AWS account. We have around 18 to 19 AWS accounts, right? In
okay,
which in one account we have around 200 to 300 servers or EC2 instances working. Only using them
right. So
if
how do
we
you manage them?
we manage them through the AWS organization, which provides the SO
Okay,
kind of service where you just use the one login user ID password and all the accounts are on one page. Then we just click on the account where we want to log in. After taking login onto that account, we just perform our task that we want to use. And some of the accounts are integrated to Terraform, some of them are not integrated to Terraform. So if there is any account which is integrated to Terraform, in that case, what we do, we just do the changes on Terraform code, and then we have to push that code on Git or Bitbucket wherever it's being managed. And then we need to run the pipeline that we have already created, the Jenkins pipeline, which performs the infrastructure provisioning for us to create the
right.
connectivity, to launch the instances, all that kind of stuff. So we will be going through the CI/CD concept as well. We will be going through the Terraform concept, like how Terraform works, what are the basics of Terraform. We will be going through every, every, everything's related to this, right? And when it comes to the CLI concept, right, we will be considering the AWS CLI as well in these sessions, right?
Understood. Thank you.
But AWS CLI is not that huge thing, and you can learn this it very easily because if you just use the AWS CLI in a hyphen, it will tell you about everything. And also, when it comes to the AWS CLI, AWS provides you the documentation. The documentation of AWS CLI is very great because it's keep changing. Like sometimes it's changing in the structure. There is a new service being introduced, so you use the AWS CLI according to that. And there is one more thing. People think that we can do automation using AWS CLI in Bash scripting or Python. Python is a separate thing. If we just talk about the AWS and the Bash scripting, doing automation with the Bash scripting and AWS CLI is very difficult. Very, very difficult. Even I'm using that in my project, so I know that like how it's very difficult. Because if you want to fetch any single thing from EC2 instance or any detail from EC2 instance using AWS CLI, you have to use the jQuery over there because it is going to give you the output in the JSON, then using the jQuery, filtering that, and getting your data after fetching many key value pairs and using that data as the input for any other task. So it's very hectic. Without, if you are not going to use the bash scripting for AWS automation, you can use the Python because we have the Boto 3, we can say module in Python that provides us to access on the AWS where you just need to provide the keys and you can easily use any service of AWS by just calling the functions. If you guys are familiar with Python, you guys can easily do the automation of AWS using Python. Even according to me, I feel more comfortable with Python as compared to Terraform because in Terraform you have to take care of lots of things, but in Python I can write my script and I can do whatever I want to do with the AWS.
So when we talk about it in the resume, you think we should rather mention that we use this library of Photo 3 rather than saying that we know Terraform?
You can mention the Terraform as well. Like usually, what happens, we don't use the Terraform on the daily basis. You guys just the Terraform code is built once, and it's like use money. You just create the Terraform pipeline, and you are just going to execute the pipeline multiple times. You're not going to create the Terraform code again and again. It will be just for one time. But when it comes to the Python, if you just mention that you have worked with Python and if you have built the AWS, or you have done the AWS automation using Python, that will be more like you can graceful or that will have more impact on your resume as compared to the Terraform. But yeah, mentioning Terraform is
Understood.
also good. It's just a tool, so you can if you adding more and more tools, will like there will be higher chances of selecting the resume if you are adding many more tools. So yeah, you can also add some basic tools like HashiCorp. You can also mention the Maven for the building process. The HashiCorp Vault, I mean, Terraform is also by HashiCorp. HashiCorp is the organization. You can also add the Vault as well, which is used for managing the secrets. It's a very simple tool, and you can go through these tools by using the directly from the documentation. They're very easy to know. Okay, like Vault like things. All right, let's come back to the AWS. Now, as you can see here, we have to provide the root user email, and after this, we have to provide the AWS account name. Now, for example, let me provide my email. Now, this email is all maybe already registered. And remember that if you guys are going to register this AWS account, note down these steps because if you are going to skip anything, AWS may charge more, right? Not about the registration steps, the steps that we are going to perform after the registration or in between while we will be adding the billing details and that kind of thing. Okay. Now, account name xyz.com. Okay. Let's verify email address and AWS is sending the verification code. Let me check the verification code on my phone. I hope I have logged in this email ID. No, I don't think so. Let me check somewhere else. So you guys can also create the email on the AWS, but sorry, account on the AWS. But remember one thing: whenever you're going to set up the billing or you're going to add the billing details, never ever add your credit card over there. The reason why you should not add your credit card because it can set up the deduction or auto payment for the from the credit card. That's why credit card is not recommended over there. I will say on the place of credit card, you guys should use the debit card, and AWS supports the debit card, but the debit card should be the Visa or the Mastercard. You cannot use the Rupee card over there. Okay. Actually, I'm going trying to log in my email address. Let me check if I have the. All right, I'm just logged in, and so do you guys have created your accounts on AWS, or this will be your first time to create the
I
account?
already have an account.
Okay, you already have
Yeah,
an account.
Yeah, even I have an account.
That's great. So you guys have set it up with the credit card or debit card?
Credit.
Credit.
Okay, no issues.
It's easier for having a chargeback on credit card. Debit card is like the money deducted immediately. So I never use debit card.
Okay, but it's risky as well.
You can just set up alarms, so I don't think it's risky. I mean, I've set up multiple alarms, so I'm pretty sure it won't go about $10, $15.
Okay,
great. They charged me $400 something.
But you can just
some
call and ask them, and you can
Yeah,
say
yeah.
you're a student, and they are very lenient with it.
okay,
I also have
some
a friend who was charged $700, but they got the money back.
all right. So as you can see here, we have to fulfill all the details, right? All of you have the accounts. That's a great thing. You can set up a personal account here for your own project. If you are running an organization, you can set up a business account as well. Okay, in the business account, they will be giving you some offers as well. So it's just up to you, but you may have to provide the proofs to the AWS that you're running a business, right? And when it comes to the personal account, you can easily register that. And again, as I said, recommended is that you should use the debit card over there, because if even if they want to perform the apply the charges or something like that, that will not happen if you don't have the don't have applied the credit card over there. Debit card is okay, but if you are using the credit card, that's not the issue. You can also go with that if you have set up the alarms. So before the bills are generated or bills are generated, you will be alarmed. And also, if you are using these services, if you are cleaning your AWS like services, so that's not the issue. It will not charge you that much. So I'm not going to register because already have one account. So it was just like showing you like how to create account. And after just this, on the fifth or fourth step, we will get the uh, area where we have to provide the account details, the credit card details, and that stuff. Also, you have to provide like the address and the city, state. You can also provide this stuff as well. Now, what will happen if your AWS account is not used from a long time, and also there's a huge bill is there, right? What will happen? Like for example, let me log in one of my account. It says already exists. Let me try one more time. Because one of my account, I was using one account on AWS and I didn't pay the bill from a very long time. So AWS just suspended that account. So let me show you how a suspended account looks like. I guess this account was suspended. Okay, FRRRZP. Now information. Okay, information does not exist, it says. All right, let's try any other account. Like for example, This account is suspended, I guess. You guys must be wondering like why I have multiple AWS accounts. So all those accounts were for testing all these sessions. So that's why, as you can see, this account is suspended, right? To reactivate this account, I have to pay the bill and then they will reactivate the account. Okay. And as you can see, if your account is suspended for more than 150 days, you can't reopen the account or use it to access AWS services. So remember these things as well. All right, now let's log into a working account so that we can access the service. But before we do that, this is the AWS front page where you can see the usage of AWS and the new services that are being launched or any AWS meetup or AWS, you can say sessions or the learnings, lots of stuff is there. Okay, so in the compute, we have the EC2, auto scaling, elastic container services, these kind of services. So we are going to use the EC2 today. We're going to talk about this and also the partners and the advertising and marketing, all the stuff is there. Okay, now let's sign into the AWS. That was the older account, so that's the reason why it was saying to log out, and this account is working. It's 4G or 4Q? Seems like 4G, 7 SMX. Okay, G5G, it's Q348. YGSW36. Okay, so here we have the AWS console. Okay, now the point the first question is like which AWS region we should select while working on AWS. Now from here you can select the region. Okay, now what I will suggest you to use the North Virginia or Ohio because they are very cheap in cost. If you launch the instance in Mumbai, the AWS will charge you more because of the taxes in India. So taxes are also applied in your billing. So I will suggest you to launch your resources in North Virginia or Ohio because I guess they, according to me, they are the cheapest regions for using the AWS, right? And here we have the whole console. From on the services tab, you will see the services, and these are the recently visited services. If your account is very new, you won't see this. You can select the compute here, and here we have the EC2 services. Okay, but before we start the EC2 service, let's talk about the networking here. So for the networking, first of all, we should have the VPC. Okay, so I'm in the North Virginia region. Always remember that if you have launched an instance in North Virginia and accidentally you switch your region from North Virginia, for example, you can see we have one VPC here, right? Here in US East, North Virginia. Let me open this. We have one VPC here, right? Already created. And if I change the region from North Virginia to Ohio, I'm just switching the region. And as you can see, we also have one more VPC here. But to clearly focus here, like the VPC ID is 448A, right? In Ohio. And if I click here in North Virginia, the VPC ID is A7CD. So both are completely different VPCs. So always remember that if you have launched the instance in region A, that instance will never reflect on any other region. Okay. Sometimes what we do, like we have launched the instance on any other separate region, and we are searching for the instance on a different region, and AWS will keep charging for that service. So always remember this. Always the regions that you are visiting, remember those regions and clean your resources before leaving the AWS or before your work is done. After that, you can do that. Okay. Now we have this VPC. If we just click here, this is a default VPC, and the CIDR of the VPC is this 172.31.0.0.1/16. The /16 is the, like you can say, subnetting. So here we have the two zeros here. So the instances or the subnets will be created inside this VPC will have the will come under this CIDR. Okay, so there are multiple IPs in this CIDR. You can calculate the IPs on the IP calculator. You can just type this CIDR. If you just click here, IP calculator, IP subnet calculator will be here, and you can just paste the subnet here. Should provide the, okay, let me just put here. Although we should provide the IP address here, but I guess I need to select the 16 here. Maybe something like this. Okay, so the total number of hosts here is 65,536, okay, in this subnet, as you can see. So this is the range, and the last IP will be this. Okay, so by using this calculator, you can calculate the IPs inside the subnets. You may be using this multiple times for creating subnet to dividing subnets, like you can create multiple subnets in one VPC. So you will be using this multiple times. Okay, so as I told you, you can only create 5 VPCs in one region. So always remember that if you need more VPCs, either you have to change the region or you have to ask the AWS, or you can create a new AWS account to launch one more VPC. So that's the recommended one. You can create one more account, because if your work is very high where you require more than 5 VPCs, you can create another AWS account. Now, as you can see, these are the details of VPC, like VPC ID, which is very important, because whenever you're going to do the peering or any other task related to CLI, the VPC ID will be recommended over there, right? You should have VPC ID. This is the DHCP option. You guys know DHCP, right?
Yeah, we do.
So DHCP, dynamic host configuration or control protocol, which actually assigns the IP address. So it provides us the DHCP, which is automatically created whenever you create a VPC. The main route table, this is also created automatically. The main ACL, network ACL, which is also known as network access control list, this is also created automatically. And the CIDR. So how we can create a VPC? It's a very simple thing. Create VPC, VPC only, VPC and more. If you select VPC and more, you can create multiple things. Here it will show you the graph. Like I want to create the VPC with multiple subnets like this. Okay. So project VPC, and here I want two subnets in US East A and US East 1 B. These two are availability zones. The reason why it's suggesting the different availability zones is like for the balance, we can say, of the traffic on the availability zones, or as I told you earlier, like disaster recovery. For example, due to some reason, one availability zone is facing the network outage or the power outage, the second availability zone will be handling the traffic. That's why. And as you can see, in the every availability zone, there is one public subnet and one private subnet. Okay, and also here. And in the ending, there are three route tables. Route table is a place where you define the routing, like how the traffic will be flowing from one end to another. So this is also important one. Route table is a very sensitive, and whenever you are performing changes in route table, before that you should know what you are going to do. So it is recommended to note down the changes and decide, if I am defining this route, this will not impact the any running resource, because as per my experience, this is very sensitive thing, route table. Now, you cannot delete the VPC. Like for example, most of the people think like if somebody accidentally deletes the VPC, what will happen then? Because every resource is going to be launched inside that VPC. You cannot delete the VPC if there is any single resource launched into it, right? So VPC or any other service, like if you're using security groups or any other thing, you cannot delete anything if there is something already present into that resource. Okay, not about the EC2 instances. You can terminate EC2 instances directly, even if the data is present into it. It's not about the EC2 instance. It's about the entries, like the security groups, the VPCs, these kind of things. Now, I will create the VPC only. I'm not going to create the whole stuff here. Or in some case, if you want to create the whole stuff, you can also do that. Here you have to provide the name. Now, as you can see, name is also a tag. Tags are the things which will help you to identify a resource. Now, as I told you about the AWS CLI, where you can identify the resources, change the resources, and also create the resources. So tags are very helpful in that case if you want to perform the filtration over there. Also, while using the Terraform or any other infrastructure provisioning tool, tags will be helping you every time. And after this, IPv4, IPv4 allocated IPv CIDR block, whatever you're going to select, I will just recommend you to this manual input. Okay. Or you can just select the IP from the pool. Now we don't have the IPM pool, so I will not recommend this. If you have the specific pool selected, you can also select the IP from there. Now here we have by default the no IPv6. That's also like if you want to use the IPv6, it's just up to you. But if you are a beginner, IPv6 is not recommended. Sooner, the whole world will be moving from IPv4 to IPv6 because we have more IPs in IPv6. Like the world has started moving on IPv6, but it will be completely moved to the IPv6 later. Now let's create the VPC. For example, let me create a VPC called test VPC. And here for the CIDR, what I'm going to choose is like the CIDR was this, right? For the VPC CIDR. So what I'm going to do is on the place of 16, you have to type 24 and let's decide one here. Okay. No. That's not the one. Sorry. I just accidentally typed the IP address of the subnet of the another VPC. That will create the wrong impact. We can select the. We have to define completely whole different CIDR. The reason why, because this CIDR is already allocated to one VPC. I thought I'm going to create the subnet. That's why I was defining the 24. So whenever we are going to create the subnet inside this VPC, whose CIDR was this, in that case, you need to define the CIDR like this, and you will be choosing the subnet like this, and you have to type 24 here. And in one this subnet, we have. Let me select 24 here. Let's remove this. As you can see, in this subnet, we have 256 IPs, right? Because there is only one zero here in the ending. Okay. So one is for like 0 to 256 and two are subtracted from that. So that's like, so we can also select the 10.0.0.2. What was that? I guess it was one in the end, right? All zeros. Okay, 0/16 or 24. And the tag is already created. Let's create the VPC. As you can see, VPC is created automatically. And this is the CIDR for VPC that we can use. Okay. And if you click on route tables, one route table, which is the main route table, that will be also created automatically. Here we have the route table. So this is the test VPC. As you can see, VPC ID, then pipe symbol and test VPC. Okay. And you remember we gave the name to the VPC, so the name will be displayed here. This is a tag. These all are tags. So these are very helpful whenever you're going to search the resource or you're going to select the resource. So this is how you can create the VPC. And whenever you want to create the subnet, you just need to click here, create subnet, select the VPC where you want to create the subnet. So for example, I want to create the subnet in this VPC, subnet name, subnet-test. Okay, availability zone. Now we have multiple availability zones in this region. So we have to select one of them. So North Virginia A. So this is the A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay, so I'm selecting A here. Now VPC block. So I'm just going to select the CID. As you can see, we have a session of 10.0.0.0/24. /24 means the last one, right? We have the last one. So I will just select this one. Okay, and the name is already given. Just create the subnet. As you can see, we have also created the subnet. Now, how to create a public subnet, right? Whenever you want to create a public subnet, you just need to add the internet gateway into it. Okay, so whenever we add an internet gateway, that means the internet connectivity has been added to the subnet and you can access the internet into it. So for example, this is the default VPC and this is the CIDR. If we just click on the subnets, let's see if we have more subnets. And as you can see, we already have few subnets in the default VPC, right? This, and these subnets are already present in default VPC. And if you go to the route table, you can see there is one route added here, which is IGW. IGW means Internet Gateway. So whenever you want to create the add the subnet into the route table, or you want to create a public subnet, what you need to do is you can create a new route table, or you can add the Internet Gateway into the default one as well. So this is the default one. If you just click on routes, as you can see, we have one IGW and one local. If you click the newer one, here we only have the local, right? So till now, there is no internet gateway attached to this route table. You have to create one. You can create that and you can attach that into this. So how to attach the internet gateway? Click here and you just need to here subnet associations. You can click here, edit subnet association, right? Here you need to select the subnet. So we only have one subnet right now. So we just have to select this one and that will be associated. If you have multiple subnets and you want to add multiple subnets in one route table, you can also do that. Okay. And also you have to, if you want to create an internet gateway and you have to attach that, you can also do that directly. So for example, we have this internet gateway attached here. If you click here, you can also detach it from the VPC. Okay, so internet gateway is attached to VPC and that is automatically reflected to the main route table. Okay, so in the main route table, you will see the internet gateway. And let's talk about the private subnet. So private subnet is the subnet where there is no internet gateway. So it will be attached to the route table where there is no internet gateway, or it will be outside the route table. So let me check, like if we have we must have the private subnets here, or all are the public one. All are the public one because I created them for the separate work. Okay, it's nothing but like our subnet that we created recently is right now a private subnet because there is no internet gateway. So you can consider it as a private subnet, right? There is no internet gateway right now here. Now let's talk about the net gateway. You guys know about the net gateway, right? Do you have any idea about the net gateway? Hello.
Communication between private and public sub.
The reason why we use the net gateway. Do you guys have any idea?
No.
No. Okay, so what happens here? For example, this is a system. Okay, and I'm just taking the raw example. I'm not talking about AWS right now. So this is a system, and this is another system. For example, you can consider it as a Google server or any server, right? The client server architecture. Now, for example, whenever I'm sending request to server, right? What are the basic requirements to send a connection or to request to the server or to connect to the internet? What are the basic requirements? We should have a public IP address, right? We should have an internet connection and a public IP address. Internet connection is nothing but you have a connection that connectivity, you have the IP address by which you can connect to the internet, right? Internet is also a group of computers, we can say. The definition that we have learned in our 8th or ninth standard. The internet is a group of computers. Now, whenever you're going to connect to the internet or the server, there's only one requirement is that you should have a public IP address and also a MAC address, of course, but we are going to talk about the IP address only, right? So public IP is must. Without public IP address, you cannot connect to the internet. The reason why, because if you only have the private IP, you can only communicate inside your local area network. You cannot go to the internet. Now, if I am going to the internet with the public IP, so same as it is, internet is responding me or that server is responding me through my public IP address, right? So public IP is my identity. That's the reason why I'm able to connect to the internet and internet is able to connect to me. Now, when it comes to the connections or the network connections, we have multiple types like bridge network. You guys know about bridge network? Hello?
No.
No. So you can say like in the bridge network, most of the times we have a static public IP. Let me show you an example. If you just go on Google, what's my public IP? If I just do this, If you click on the first website, it will show you your first public IP. So as you can see, this is my service provider and this is my public IP address, right? So if this is my public IP address, so can I host a website on my system? If I just ask you one question, what is the requirement of a server, right? A server also requires a public IP address. And what we do whenever we open google.com, what happens in the background? It's resolving it into the IP address, right? The DNS resolver, DNS resolves it into the IP address, and through the IP address, we are going to connect to the Google, right? Which is a server. Because IP address is the actual address where we want to go. Names are just for our convenience, right? We cannot remember the numbers. That's the reason we are using the names. Now, if I do the same thing, I have the public IP address. Can I host any website on my system? Basically, no. The reason is that because I don't have the bridge connection, or I can say I don't have the static public IP address. What does it means? That my IP address will remain same for long term, or I have the bridge connection. That means if I am going to the internet can also come to me. This will not happen. Why I'm not able to delete this? Okay. So as you can see, I can go to the internet, but internet cannot come to me. I can get the response through the public IP address that I have, which is the dynamic one, but internet cannot come to me. That means nobody can access my system from outside. This connection is called the net connection, which is actually working here. Now, in my scenario where this net connection is being working. So what's happening here? Let me give you a huge scenario. For example, there is a person called A, okay, and there's a person called B here. Now, if A and B live in neighborhood and they want to send them a message, right, through the Facebook or any other social media, what will happen here? There will be internet lines and there will be some physical routers, right? The traffic will be routed through these networks, through these routers. And also there will be the involvement of the server, the service that we are using, the Facebook or the WhatsApp, whatever we are using. Through that server, the traffic will be again routed to the routers. I'm just only creating one router here. There will be multiple routers, right? And then the connection will be traveled to the B. Now here, what is happening? The netting or the net concept is working at the router end. In our case, where we are using the broadbands, the netting is being done on the router end. Where what's happening? This router is creating another IP address using my private IP address or IP address which is assigned by this router. IP address is assigned by this router. Okay. Now this net gateway or net router is performing the netting and sending me to the internet by masking my IP address. It's not showing my actual IP address by masking my IP address with another IP address. So what happens eventually? Whenever you go to the internet, you are not going to going completely open. You are going through the net. So you are going to a public internet. You are going to access the public internet, but you're not going to expose yourself. Let me give you more brief into it. So for example, this is a base system called Windows system. You guys may be aware about the VMware or VirtualBox, right? You have done Linux. So if you have the virtual system here, a VM, and we have selected the bridge network in the VM, what happens there? This VM is directly connected to the hardware device, or I can say the service or the driver, which is acting as a network in my system. That can be the Wi-Fi or a LAN adapter, right? And then takes the IP from my DNS, from my DHCP, my home router, when we use the bridge connection. For example, the router IP is 192.168.1.1, right? And my Windows system IP is 192.168.1.2 because it's a system. And when I'm creating a machine and I'm connecting it to the bridge network, the IP will be 192.168.1.3 because this VM is acting as a real machine to this DHCP because it's a bridge network. Similarly, how a public network works to the bridge. In this case, if I host anything on this VM, anybody who is connected to this DHCP or this router can access that stuff. because this is open to public. Now, if we consider this as a server and this system as the okay any other server, this system as the our system, right? So we are going to through this router. This router is working as a NAT gateway or a bridge connection, sorry, in this case, and connecting us to the public IP address or public server with sharing our public IP address, right? We have a static public IP address which will be this. Now let's jump to the another concept. What if we are using the NAT gateway or NAT? So we will have a separate IP, something like this, and there will be one more service or one more device, virtual device running inside this, which will be performing natting for us, and it will act like this. So everyone, anybody who is connected to this network can't see this VM. Why? Because this VM lies under the Windows system, but still this VM can go outside and access the internet. This is called NAT. This is called NAT, where you have the IP address, you can access the internet, but nobody knows who are you. This is NAT. And when it comes to the bridge, where we are hosting the service, like if I am hosting a website, then I want that now people come to my system and access my service, right? That's the reason why I'm doing the hosting. In that case, you should have a public static IP where people will be coming to your system and accessing your service. I guess you guys got the concept, right?
Yes.
Now, the same thing works in AWS. What happens in AWS, this is the subnet, right? It's a private subnet, okay? And it's a public subnet. Now, what was the reason why this is called public subnet? We have the internet gateway, right? Attached to this subnet. Now, there is no internet gateway in private subnet. And in this scenario, what will happen? The people or the user who is using in public subnet can access the internet because it has the internet gateway, it has the IP address. But what about the private subnet? They can't access the internet. That means if you launch any instance inside this private subnet, even in that instance, you cannot access the internet. You cannot use the yum install or any other command. You cannot use the browser. Similarly, that we discussed, if we don't have the net gateway, like if you don't have the connectivity to the internet, like if you don't have bridge or net both, that means you don't have access over the internet. You cannot access, even you can't access the internet. So public IP is must to access the internet. If it's with NAT or without NAT, doesn't matter. It's necessary to access the internet. You should have a public. It's dynamic or static, doesn't matter. You should have a public IP if you want to go to the internet. Now, in this case, we cannot access that. So, what we will be doing, we will be launching one NAT gateway in the public subnet. The reason why we are launching NAT gateway in public subnet, because NAT gateway also wants the internet, right? Without internet, how NAT gateway will perform the task? So, it will be connected to the internet gateway, and this private subnet will be connected to this NAT gateway. So now what will happen here? This private subnet, this subnet can access the internet, go to the internet, but nobody else from the internet come to this private subnet. And even we can install the packages and whatever we want to do, we can perform this in private subnet. I guess you guys got the concept, right?
I just have one doubt. So
Yeah,
when
sure.
you say that when you're interacting with these servers, so you send a request and then you receive the packets. So if
Exactly.
the private um, is going through the NAT and then it can communicate with the internet, but it's a two-way communication, right? So if the packets cannot come back to it, then how will the request made to the internet be received to the private uh, subnet?
I was expecting this question, but I guess all other people are not listening me carefully. So no issues on that. It's a very simple concept. So what happens here, the gateway that you are using here, the NAT gateway, you can say like DHCP or the NAT gateway, the service which is NATing your IP or letting you to access the internet, has the responsibility to deliver the package to you. Okay, they take the responsibility to deliver the package to you. So what will happen whenever you are going to access the internet? Sorry, I just did this wrong accidentally. This will not connect to the NAT gateway has its own public IP address, right? In this case, Internet Gateway is separate. NAT Gateway has its own public IP. So what will happen here? The NAT gateway has its own public IP. So what will happen here if I launch one website here, or there is one server here? It's a very good question, because if you don't have this question in your mind, that means you don't have the doubts on networking. You are all clear with the networking. But it's a very important thing, because if you have sent the packet, it's necessary to receive the packet, right? It's not like one-way communication. It's a two-way communication. So after the private subnet, I have sent a request to access the google.com from this server. The request will be go to the NAT gateway. NAT gateway will send my request to the server, right? Now the server knows there is an IP address where it needs to serve, right? So the IP address will be NAT address, NAT gateway IP address, this IP address. And the server will be responding to NAT gateway. And NAT gateway knows the request was sent by this subnet or this system. It will deliver the request to that system. So this NAT gateway is working like this. Okay, it's just a gateway. Actually, NAT gateway is not working. There is this DHCP over there, which is actually transferring or sending the stuff. But NAT gateway is responsible for sending the IP. The NAT gateway IP will travel behalf of your IP or the private system IP. Okay.
Understood. I just have one extra question. It's not related to this topic.
Sure, sure.
Can we also discuss how peer-to-peer communication works? Because this is the client-server communication, or it's beyond the concept of this course.
Basically, it's beyond this course, although we can
Okay,
consider
then
about
that's
the.
okay. I'll just Google.
Yeah, you can Google it. It's a very simple thing, like
Yeah.
how the communication works. You will find it the
Okay.
internet. There are multiple topologies as well. You can learn those topologies in the terms of networking is a very huge concept, right?
Right.
All right.
Thank
So
you.
this is how netting works. Okay. And this is how we created talked about the VPC. We created VPC, subnet. We talked about route table, internet gateway, NAT gateway, and all those concepts. Okay. After this, tomorrow we will be talking about the EC2 instances. We will be launching the EC2 instance. We will be creating security groups. We will be attaching the public IP address. Okay. We will talk about EC2 tomorrow. So that's all for today. If you guys have any doubt, you can ask. Let me stop the recording.